One of the greatest games has thankfully come out and can only be described by its title, which is of course the game Peak, the co-op survival game where you just try and climb up a mountain while getting there with your friends. One of the best co-op experiences I've had playing a game in quite a while, and just simply one of the most fun games to come out in a very long time. Coming from the studio Landfall and Aggro, two studios known for making excellent indie titles, this game happens to be one of the best ones made, combining the silly aspects of team co-op with some truly great mechanics and just small ways to mess with the players, really forcing you to be inspired and work together to accomplish your mission. And the best part is, this game is $7 and full price and launched with a 20% discount, launching at $5 and has already sold 2 million copies in under 10 days. An absolute indictment on the state of, was that a throwable mushroom? Sorry, I got distracted. I just saw it's a tool that I hadn't experienced it because I haven't gotten that far into this game. Something that is fantastic. This game is one that is all about rewarding creativity and allowing players to play however they desire, as opposed to the AAA industry, which demands that you fall neatly and tightly into their bracket of how they want you to play. They want you to fall into a small box and not deviate from that, whereas this game and many of the other Landfall games are very similar in that they want you to explore the game at your own whim. And so that makes it of no shock to see that Landfall has successfully sold 2 million copies in this game, and they truly deserve it, which leads to them reflecting on the very nature of the indie market versus AAA market, which has them saying some truly inspirational things. So before going any further, like, subscribe, and let's get into this. Now, Landfall is one of those studios that has always prioritized these small, tightly made games with a lot of replayability, usually focusing on co-op. With them making Peak just now, they just had the game Haste come out, and they're also really big about being transparent with when they're making. So they have tons of dev things just showing how these games are made and how they're going about doing things and involving the fans in how they develop the games. Content warning is another one that's incredibly fun to play with friends, where it's literally you and your friends are content creators going into abandoned places and getting killed by monsters. And then once you finish the round, you get to watch the video that you recorded of your journey down there, and you can copy it and paste it. They have games like Nightfall, which they decided to give away for free because they stopped working on it. Totally Accurate Battle Simulator, Rounds, all of these games are small games that cost very little to develop and are made very quickly, and that was continued with Peak, where they teamed up with Aggro, the developers behind Not Another Crab's Treasure, which of course has led this developer to get a little peeved because, while Not Another Crab's Treasure was their favorite game to make, it didn't sell nearly as well as Peak happened to do, and they're just confused how this game, which was made in under a month, somehow oversold their game. Peak developers react to selling 1 million copies after suffering a lot of burnout from making bigger games. The realization that smaller projects like this can work has set our studio in a new direction. We want to mostly make smaller projects moving forward with clearer scopes and shorter development time. There aren't very many games industry successes that look like Peak. The comedic co-op climber, developed as a collaboration between indie studios Aggro, and Landfall during a manic month-long game jam in Korea and B&B, less than a week after launch, it's already made over 1 million sales, turn that to 2 million. For lead devs at both studios, Peak is a clear lesson. Shorter is often better, especially when you're dealing with burnout. Before Aggro, and Landfall dispatched their devs to Korea for their game jam collab, the studios had been iterating on Peak's core concept for months. Aggro creator director Kaylin Rashby Pollock said the game initially looked much closer to an open-world survival thingy, but Landfall's collaborators urged the team to tighten its scope. Aggro did some amazing work with their Not Another Crab's Treasure, which is basically an underwater Souls-like. You go in and you're a crab fighting large crabs, heavy focus on dodge mechanics, heavy focus on the punishment of death, and heavy focus on parrying and big boss battles. It's really Dark Souls, not a baby's first Dark Souls type game, and so they were clearly trying to follow suit with that, make something big and grand for the next game for Peak. And then Landfall Studios came in and pointed out that maybe we're focusing a bit too wide. Instead of making this grand adventure, this phenomenal open world experience, maybe we make something tighter. And so in just a month, they created Peak, which is, like I said, the name is perfect. This game is Peak. Between then and February, we had a ton of conversations online, refining the concept. With Wilhelm and other Landfallers published a super hard to focus on a single tight core mechanic. The first person climbing, Rashby Pollock said, it was clearly the right idea. We ended up scaling the island down dramatically from our original plans and spent more of our limited time developing ways for scouts to collaborate or mess with each other in interesting ways on their way up the mountain. Effectively, as you climb up the mountain, you'll reach checkpoints. If you beat your teammates to the checkpoint, the game punishes you by having a giant monster with spindly claws chase after you to throw you off the mountain for abandoning your friends. But that doesn't mean you can't mess with them. Items like banana peels allow for you to make them slip. You can place them in positions where they end up stepping and flipping over top of on a jellyfish, or running into poison spikes, draining their stamina bar. But Aggro Crab is a studio that's very clearly in the AAA mind space, despite being an indie studio. They want to go big, they want to go grand. But this game, being the small scale that it is, was not only first, but a revelation that maybe sometimes smaller games are better. And to be honest, the reason why this game sold so much better than None Other Crab's Treasure is largely in the pricing. None Other Crab's Treasure is going to block out a lot of players who don't feel like getting into a Souls-like. Even with the journalist mode giving you a gun that one-shots everything, people might not be interested in playing that game, and especially not at a $30 price tag, whereas Peak is currently $5.99. Another Crab's Treasure was a 3+ year development and marketing cycle. Our first title, Going Under, was similar. Needless to say, Peak felt like a speed run of that entire process, but it was something we really needed, Wilson said. We suffered a lot of burnout from working on the previous project for so long, and doing smaller scope projects gave us a good refresh that gave us our spark back. The realization that smaller projects like this can work has set our studio in a new direction and that we're really excited about. And this is a lesson that the AAA studio heavily needs to learn. With 10-year development cycles and games costing $400 to $900 million, things are getting a little out of hand. When you're putting all of your money and stake on one title, hoping that one title succeeds, you could be publishing a bunch of small titles that help you build up to that really big title. One thing about a game like Peak is it's an excellent tech demo. You develop the ability to make a really solid climbing mechanic, and oh hey, when you finally make your next big game, your next tentpole game, you can throw a more developed version of that climbing mechanic into it. You're just using these games, these smaller games, as a way to test new ideas. I love games that are just tech demos. I mean, tech demo games have always been one of the big focus. Games that cost very little or sometimes free and just show you how the tool works so you can learn better ideas and better tools to do it. I mean, Wii Sports is a tech demo. Another nice thing is something like these jam session games are designed in a way that you could make a ton of them in a calendar year. This game took them a month to make and likely very little monetary resources. So had Peak failed, it would have impacted absolutely nothing and nobody. But this is a sentiment we've seen echoed elsewhere in the game industry, where development horror stories like Dragon Age: The Veilguard have shown how sprawling, interminable development cycles at big-budget publishers wreak havoc on studios and their staff. Meanwhile, Kepler Interactive portfolio director Matthew Handrahan credits the publisher's success with Clair Obscur Expedition 33 to its deliberately constrained scale. For Landfall, the immediate response to Peak's launch is only further proof that its best works with a tighter scope. Landfall head of community said that the studio's longer projects like Totally Accurate Battle Simulator and Haste, both of which took around 3 years of development, strained the team's focus and interest. But the really cool thing about Landfall is while they're making their bigger projects, they were still putting out small projects. While they were working on Haste for 3 years, they managed to put out games like Content Warning, things that fed their bank account and cost very little to develop, and were likely tech demos for other processes. Or other projects like Stick Fighter, 2 months, Content Warning 6 weeks, and Rounds 5 months have been much smoother experiences for us. Folgerberg said, even if we're super happy with both Tabs and Haste as games, we want to most make smaller projects moving forward with clearer scopes and shorter development times. This is really funny because what Landfall is learning is basically the lesson that Hollywood forgot. If you guys recall, the way that the movie industry used to work is we'd have a tentpole release every couple of months, but between those tentpole releases, we'd get a lot of really small budget comedies that would really blow up the release schedule of films. That way, studios were always releasing small movies that didn't have to break even, because if only one of them made a lot of money, it would pay for all of them. And then having 1 or 2 tentpoles that really took a bulk of the budget. Whereas in today's market, both in movies and games, people are basically only focused on the tentpole blockbuster releases, which means there's nothing to pad up the income during the downtime. I mean, right now, Peak is sitting at 58,000 players, with the yesterday's peak being at 89, but the all-time peak of $102,000. For a game that was made in a month, any amount of player count is fathomably fantastic. This is a great amount of players for a game that was likely made with a couple $1,000 budget at most. Haste, which is a relatively cheap game as well, I think only about $20, and one that is endlessly replayable, is also doing pretty well. Even if this was a 3-year cycle, they managed to keep a consistently amount of players going, and as this game ages more, it's likely to have repeated sales coming back towards it. This game is going to benefit heavily from when games go on sale. This is the kind of game that people will buy when it's $5, $10 on, say, Steam Summer Sale, which is happening right now. Another one, content warning, which was overshadowed heavily by other games like Lethal Company, so this game wasn't even in the prime of the zeitgeist when it came out, still managed to host a shockingly large 204,000 player count at its greatest peak. And Lethal Company hitting a similar amount, with both of these games being about $10 to buy. Lethal Company was made by a single guy as one of his first games. And even something like Repo, which is another $10 game that's just focused at people playing co-op, is selling and being played at massive amounts. These small budget, cheap to buy games, the kind that really are the filler games, are the thing that's going to keep the gaming industry moving forward. Indie is always the way to go. Single A and AA are the only ways for the gaming industry to really continue, and is something that the AAA studios need to learn. They need to start publishing small level games again. EA used to be the king of fodder games, releasing pointless DSi releases for no reason other than they owned the rights to the property. And sure, there will always be room for tentpole blockbuster releases like the Assassin's Creed titles, Dragon Age the Veilguard, and whatever, but you really need to find a way to subsidize the downtime when you're working on those games, and making something that take a month to make, that is $10, that encourages co-op. Maybe you shouldn't get so greedy and you'll find your pockets being lined even heavier. By focusing on games that just price out your audience, by focusing on charging $80 for new releases, you're going to run into a lot of people who just simply don't have the capital or desire to buy your game. But here's the crazy thing. When you make a game that has a small budget and you're only charging $5 to $10 for it, a lot of people will buy the game, play it once, and not bother returning it because $5 to $10 simply isn't enough to cry about. But if you release an $80 game and the people buy it and they're not interested, they'll return that bitch, or they just won't buy it to begin with out of risk of not being entertained. Whereas people will gladly pay $10 for Peak, and if they don't enjoy Peak, so what? It's $10. It's not the end of the world. Indie development time, indie development costs, and indie game prices are what's going to allow for studios to really start making their money back, really start justifying the development of their games. And also, this game is just a ton of fun. If you aren't playing this game, then I feel bad for you. Go out and play it. It's fantastic, and it's $5. And hopefully some people with a lot of drive and a lot of creativity learn this lesson, that sometimes smaller is better. Constraint is not a problem, it feeds and it grows. When you're given a small budget, when you're given a small amount that you have to work with, it inspires you to find a way to stretch that small budget to be as large as possible. Restriction breeds ingenuity, and this game is just proof of it. But that's pretty much what I've got. Let me know, have you guys played this game, or are you guys thinking about playing it? And I will see you guys on the next one.